Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field. Georgie Lee Abel, Samuel Ashcroft, John Robert Atkinson, Edwin Albert Baker, Natalie Barraga, Mary Kay Bauman, Donald Blosh, Warren Bledsoe, Father Thomas Carroll, Charles F. Campbell, Cleo Dolan, William English, Eleanor Fay, Catherine Gruber, William Allen Hadley, Everett Butch Hill, Richard Edwin Hoover, Samuel Gridley Howe, Douglas Inkster, Robert B. Irwin, Kenneth Jernigan, Ruth Carlella, Helen Adams Keller, Roy Cumpy, Bertold Lowenfeld, Anne Sullivan Macy, Durward McDaniel, Abraham Nemeth, Arnold Patz, Alice Raftery, Louis Reeves, Jr., Peter Salmon, Stanley Suterko, Mary Elizabeth Switzer, Josephine Lister Taylor, Louis Ficelli, Donald Wedower, Robert Whitstock, Russell Williams, James Max Woolley. Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field. The paths that our heroes have blazed and the legacies they have left provide us with purpose and meaning. Dr. Dean Tuttle. The Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field is dedicated to preserving, honoring, and promoting the tradition of excellence manifested by the specific individuals inducted into the Hall of Fame and through the history of outstanding services provided to people who are blind or visually impaired. Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field.
The establishment of the Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field was announced at annual meeting in 2001. The Hall is an outgrowth of a gallery of pioneers and heroes for the blindness field presented at the AAR conference in Denver in July 2000. The Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field is not APH's Hall of Fame. It's the Hall of Fame of the field of blindness. It just happens to be located in the 1926 wing of the APH building, which also houses the APH's Bar Research Library. We are, however, extremely honored to provide it a home. Please join me in welcoming the chairperson of the Hall of Fame Advisory Board, Dr. Cay Holbrook, who is the professor of the teacher training program, head of the teacher training program at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, British Columbia. Dr. Holbrook.
Good evening. Well, it seems like this evening couldn't get any more special, but we're about to see that it can. Watching these talented artists bring to mind that the future is full of promise. Now we have an opportunity to celebrate the promise that was realized by our two inductees in the Hall of Fame. I knew I would not get through this. One paragraph, I got through one paragraph. As most of you know, the Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness field is located here in Louisville. Some people who are in this room tonight were also present 5 years ago this week when we were joined by 9 of the 10 living legends who were the first inductees at the Hall of Fame. For people who were at that gathering, the evening was both historic and forward-looking because we honored our past. And as we honor our past, we look at what we value for our future. Pearl S. Buck said, "If you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday." By recognizing excellence in our past, we are aspiring for excellence today. You've just heard the mission statement of the Hall of Fame, but I'm going to state it again. The Hall of Fame for Leaders and Legends of the Blindness field is dedicated to preserving, honoring, and promoting the tradition. George, hold my hand. Preserving, honoring, and promoting the tradition of excellence manifested by the specific individuals inducted into the Hall of Fame, and through the history of outstanding service to people who are blind or visually impaired. While located at the American Printing House for the Blind here in Louisville, as Tuck has said, the Hall of Fame really belongs to us all, and continues as a result of hard work by a variety of people throughout North America. These people are committed to maintaining the mission of the Hall of Fame by supporting fundraising efforts and participating in the selection of the induction process. The work of selecting inductees for the Hall of Fame is the responsibility of the Hall of Fame Advisory Committee, and I've been honored to serve as the chair of this committee for the past several years. Nominations for the Hall of Fame are accepted from November, that's next month, through March of each year. The advisory committee receives and ranks nominations and makes the selection of inductees with the ceremony to be held in the fall of the year, typically at the APH Annual Meeting. Inductees have made a significant contribution to the education or rehabilitation of individuals who are blind or visually impaired. Napoleon once said, "A leader is a dealer in hope." These words ring so true when considering the members of the Hall of Fame. They are symbols of hard work that permeate our field, and when we honor each of them, we are honoring each other. I hope that you've all had an opportunity to visit the Hall of Fame. If not, please try to do so. You will find that a visit to the Hall is inspiring, both in our understanding of the impact of the members of the Hall of Fame and in our hope of what we individually can do to make a difference in the world. It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. George Zimmerman, who will be kicking off our celebration and serving as our MC for the evening. So, George Zimmerman.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much as well. If you think Kay's bad at crying, wait till you see me. 15 minutes down the road here. But good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all. It is both an honor and a pleasure for me to have been invited to be a part of this evening's Hall of Fame Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field induction ceremony. Before I introduce the class of 2007, allow me to take a moment to thank APH and Tuck for hosting our field's Hall of Fame and for creating such a beautiful and warm, welcoming space in which it is housed. And if, as Kay said, if you haven't been there, you really need to see it because it really is a beautiful place. It is truly special, and I might add quite classy, and something for our field to be very proud of. I would also like to thank the Hall of Fame Advisory Board, Jim Deremick, Susan Spungen, Kathy Hubner, Rod Cossack, Pat Smith, Elton Moore, Tuck, and of course the token Canadian, Cay Holbrook. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way, to all the Canadians in the audience. And especially Bob Brasher, as well as other staff at APH, the Blums, and everybody else behind the scenes who contribute tirelessly to ensure that our Hall of Fame continues to grow, and for doing all the background work to make this evening special. When I think of the Hall of Fame, I am moved by the implications of what it means for our field and the influences these honorees have had upon me both professionally and personally. I frankly am humbled by their work, and I confess that being one of those people who was always keenly aware of traditions and of the accomplishments made by those who have gone before me, that much of what I have attempted to do so far professionally and aspire to do in the future is directly connected and a testimony to the legacy that each of the 40 inductees have left behind. If we could strip away all of the titles and honors bestowed upon each and every one of these inductees and somehow peer inside their souls, I'll bet we'd find that they each possessed the very basic yet fundamental characteristic of compassion, combined with a never-ending drive to improve the lives of individuals who are blind or visually impaired. Now, I know many people who have compassion. I'm sure we all do. And I know just as many people who are driven, sometimes in the wrong way. But the inductees in this Hall of Fame are unique because they all possessed both the never-ending drive and the compassion to make life better for others. Of course, I believe that they were very gifted and good at what they did, but I firmly believe that that's not the whole story. They became Hall of Fame inductees because they gave of themselves altruistically. They put others before themselves. By their contributions and their unselfish service, they have provided all of us with an easy-to-read roadmap for excellence. And as I look out over this well-groomed, gussied-up audience, I am proud to say that I see many future compassionately driven future Hall of Famers. Oh, look, I'm on a big screen. Never been on a big screen before. It's such an honor for me. The two inductees into this year's Hall of Fame, Charles Campbell and Butch Hill, exemplify and define the terms compassion and drive, and both use these characteristics to improve the lives of individuals who are blind and visually impaired. Though they never met, their professional goals and accomplishments were inherently intertwined. Both were visionaries who cared deeply about the production and dissemination of scholarship, as well as a commitment to the growth of professionalism within the field. In a moment, you'll hear from Rick Welsh, who will tell you about Charles Campbell's contributions to our field and the manner by which he set about to improve the lives of individuals who are blind or visually impaired, as well as the individuals who served them. Before he comes up, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to Mr. Campbell's life. Charles Campbell's remarkable service was initially focused on demonstrating what persons who are blind could accomplish in the way of employment. He did so first as a lecturer in 1903, then as the manager of a demonstration project for the Massachusetts Association for the Blind from 1904 to 1905. Later, he served as a member of the council for the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind in 1906. In 1907, Charles conceived and launched the Outlook for the Blind, known today as JVIB, and he served as its volunteer editor until 1923. He also served as the volunteer executive secretary of the American Association of Workers for the Blind from its establishment in 1905 until 1919. He was considered by his peers the leading and most effective advocate for the establishment of the American Foundation for the Blind in 1923. Campbell also served as the executive director of the Pennsylvania Association for the Blind in Pittsburgh, the Ohio Commission for the Blind, and the Ohio State School for the Blind in Columbus, and the Detroit League for the Handicapped. During World War I, he served as the assistant director and then director in charge for the American Red Cross at the Evergreen, which is a rehabilitation center in Baltimore for returning veterans who were blinded during the war. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you Rick Welsh, who will give you a little bit more background into Mr. Campbell's life.
Thank you, George. I'm glad George got past that moment where he noticed his picture on the screen. we could have been here a long time. I appreciate the opportunity the committee has extended to me to add some perspective to the contributions of Charles Campbell. Charles came to the United States in the 1890s to complete his secondary education and to attend the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He had grown up on the campus of the Royal Normal College and Academy of Music for the Blind, which had been established in London in 1872 by his father, Sir Francis Campbell. Just to tell you a little bit about Francis that I think gives you the perspective on Charles. Francis lost his vision as a child in Tennessee and was the second student to enroll at the Tennessee School for the Blind. Thank you, Jimmy. His success in teaching students to prepare for careers in music led him to the Perkins School for the Blind, where he challenged Samuel Gridley Howe to allow him to conduct a training program for 20 students. At the close of this program, 19 of the 20 had graduated and were successfully employed in music careers in the community. Howe and others on the Perkins staff disagreed specifically with Francis on the issue of how much help the school should provide its graduates when it came to finding employment. Francis believed in what we would call today an active community-based placement program to help the student make a successful transition into the community. More traditional school people felt that if the school had done its job well enough, the student should make this transition on his own. When Francis had an opportunity to start his own school in London, an active employment focus was an important part of his approach and a key factor in the school's success. Charles, the son of Francis, and his second wife, Sophia Faulkner, and Sophia was one of the teachers that Sir Francis had originally recruited to come to London and help staff the school in the beginning. There were many teachers from Perkins that made that trip over, spent a few years, and then returned. And Sophia, after the death of Francis' first wife, Sophia and Francis married and spent most of their adult years in England. Charles and his siblings grew up on the campus of the Royal Normal College. And as a result of this experience, he was steeped in knowledge and experience with blind people and in the extremely effective approach to their education and employment that had been developed by his father. So after completing his degree at MIT, Campbell returned briefly to London and worked on the vocational training programs at the Royal Normal College. He then returned to Massachusetts and began, first of all, to travel and lecture throughout the state, promoting the idea that blind people were very capable of learning and being very successful in a variety of work in the community. His enthusiasm on behalf of blind people and his persuasiveness led to the establishment in 1902 of the Massachusetts Association for the Adult Blind, one of the earliest comprehensive private agencies serving the needs of adults who are blind. This agency, which Charles served as executive director, provided an opportunity for him to establish in 1904 an experiment station to train and place blind workers in industry in an effort to show the world what they could accomplish. The success and the promise of that program convinced Charles of the need for a broader platform to adequately promote this growing concept. He advocated for the establishment of the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind in 1906. This was the first state commission for the blind established in the United States, and the need for this structure was created by the success of Charles Campbell's early efforts to place blind people in a variety of jobs. Following Charles' death in 1935, Edward Allen, in writing about Charles's influence, identified these programs as representing the beginning of a great new movement for the adult blind in this country. And Charles Campbell, who established and served as the director of both a private agency for the blind and a state commission for the blind, was clearly the father of this new movement for blind adults. In 1907, from the platform of the Massachusetts Association for the Blind, Charles launched, as George indicated, our field's first professional journal, which he titled The Outlook for the Blind, and which we now know, 100 years later, as the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness, or JVIB. In the first issue of The Outlook, he expressed his hope for the journal. He said that it would be a forum for the free and open discussion of all topics connected with work for the blind. He hoped that, quote, those who have the experience and the expert knowledge on these subjects will give us the results of their work and their observations so that all may benefit thereby. He ended his initial editorial by saying, our only desire is to be of service to the great cause of helpfulness to the blind. Come, let us reason together. By initiating this journal for these purposes, Charles Campbell perpetuated his father's rational approach to work for the blind and provided a vehicle for the professional development of this field. Much of what passed as work for the blind in this country at that time was based on religion or bias and superstition. The Campbells were promoting and encouraging a new basis, that of knowledge and results. Richard French, writing in 1932, his book From Homer to Helen Keller, attributed to the Outlook the creation of a less impassioned and more objective atmosphere that facilitated the convergence on Braille as the medium going forward. Campbell, with the help of his first wife, Wilhelmina, and her sister, Mary, who became Charlie's second wife after Wilhelmina died in 1911, edited the Outlook for its first 16 years without remuneration. Producing the journal and trying to develop ways to keep it going was a major focus of Charles' life, even as he moved into other paying positions in other states. The success of the journal and the search for a reliable way to see that it would be continued resulted in Charles promoting the need for a national organization that would take responsibility for projects such as this that were national in scope. At the AAWB conference in Toronto in 1917, Charles spoke at the banquet and made an impassioned plea for such an organization. One writer, in describing that scene, said that when Charles was done, there was not a dry eye in the place. This must happen in Canada a lot, huh? And that if the vote had been taken at that time on the need for such an organization, that it would have been passed unanimously. But as it turned out, the process required more preparation, and the vote was actually taken at the next AAWB conference in Vinton, Iowa in 1919, and a national foundation was established to take responsibility for projects that were national in scope. The continuation of the Outlook was one particular project that Charles Campbell and those who proposed this new national organization had in mind. With this action at the AAWB conference, which was then confirmed the next year by AAIB, the American Foundation for the Blind was launched. It took over the publication of the Outlook in 1923, and since that time, AFB has gone on to make many contributions to the development of the knowledge base of our profession, including the continuation of this journal for over 100 years. This journal that Charles Campbell initiated has evolved into a respected and refereed research journal that is now known in our field throughout the world, and then for the publication of textbooks and other literature that have become the backbone of the professional education of teachers, mobility specialists, counselors, and low vision specialists in our field today. Charles Campbell traveled around the country promoting an awareness of the need for AFB and raising funds for this endeavor. He frequently appeared on stage with Helen Keller in promoting this effort. Writing in February 1936, the February 1936 issue of The Outlook, which was dedicated to Charles Campbell, who had died the previous December, Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan Macy revealed that it was Campbell who had come to Helen while she was still an undergraduate student and suggested that she had a special calling. She wrote, "While I was still in Radcliffe College, his eloquent pleadings convinced my teacher and me that there was something we could do to better the condition of the adult blind. More than anyone else, he pointed out to us the way in which we could help most effectively." This she did through her lifelong promotion of AFB and other causes. Charles Campbell was also a leader in the movement to evolve the Blind People's Higher Education and Improvement Association, which is an organization started in 1895 by graduates of schools for the blind and had been developed as a counterpoint to the American Association of Instructors for the Blind, AAIB, which was an organization of superintendents of the schools for the blind. In 1905, with the strong leadership provided by Charles and by Ambrose Shotwell, and with a strong belief in the value of what could be contributed to our work by blind people themselves, this organization was reconstituted as the American Association of Workers for the Blind. This association still had a predominance of blind members, but it made provision for the participation and voting of sighted people who were involved in education and rehabilitation of the blind. Charles served as the volunteer secretary of the new association until 1919. He and his second wife, Mary, are in a group photograph of the first meeting of the leaders of AAWB and AAIB in 1916, and they had come together to explore the value of bringing these two associations together. It took us 70 more years before this idea became a reality and AER was created. Charles Campbell served as executive secretary of the Pennsylvania Association for the Blind, where he not only continued to develop employment programs for blind people, but where he also launched a prevention of blindness program, which included early screening of children for blindness. And on promotion, he also promoted the widespread use of silver nitrate to eliminate ophthalmia neonatorum, which was the most common cause of blindness among newborns at the time. And if you look at that first decade of the Outlook, you'll see a lot of articles that focused on trying to prevent preventable blindness. The tradition of early vision screening and programs that Charles started in Pittsburgh at that time continues today, and I was a part of that when I was there at the agency. Charles Campbell moved to Columbus, where he helped to develop a program for the employment of blind adults. He was later appointed superintendent of the Ohio State School for the Blind. And when the Army and Red Cross set up a rehabilitation program for veterans blinded in World War I, Charles was recruited to help develop it. He left behind his wife and his mother, who by that time had moved back to the United States following the death of Sir Francis. He left behind his wife and his mother to continue to manage the Ohio school, and he moved to Baltimore as the first professional from the field of work for the blind to join in this post-war effort at Evergreen. He served in various leadership roles in this program for the nearly 4 years that it was in operation. Following his work at Evergreen, Charles moved to Detroit, where he took on the leadership role at the Detroit League for the Handicapped, an organization which also supplied work to homebound blind people. Because the League was a beneficiary of the Detroit Community Fund, he became very successful at raising funds for this organization. When the League's activities were greatly reduced during the Depression, Charles was appointed as the Community Fund's Director of Education. a position he held at the time of his death. At the time when he was leaving Boston to move to Pittsburgh, there was an article in the Boston Transcript, one of the newspapers of the day, describing what he had contributed. I just want to read a couple of sentences from that. The better understanding of the public as to the needs of the blind, the supplanting of the old idea of charity with that of equipping the blind with the means of self-help, the creation of a diversity of occupations never thought of in connection with blind workers, and never thought possible before by the blind themselves, with moral results in renewed health and strength and efficiency and awakened ambitions. These constitute a body of achievement which can never be told in words. When Charles died in 1935, the next issue of the Outlook for the Blind carried articles praising his many contributions to the field. It was clear from the many letters about him, from many leaders throughout the field, that he was generally regarded as one of the most influential members of the field of work for the blind in this country for the previous 3 decades. In an article that Charlie himself had written earlier, he had said that one of his earliest memories was being carried around the campus of the Royal Normal College on the shoulders of his blind father. Today, those of us who participate in the continuing evolution of our field to a more professional and reason-based service are all standing on Charlie's shoulders. Through the good graces of Susan Thornsberry, who was with us this evening, a writer from Tennessee who was working on a biography of Sir Francis Campbell, we've been able to contact some of Charles Campbell's descendants. And we are joined this evening by 2 of his grandsons, Fred Campbell, who's at the table, and Charles Campbell Mead, who's here on the stage with us to accept the plaque on behalf of the Hall of Fame. Okay?
So it's my great pleasure to present this bas-relief plaque of Charles F. Campbell in honor of this great man's wonderful contributions.
I guess it's kind of obvious where my name came from. I was asked if I'd say a few words about what this meant to our family. One of the first things it's meant to our family, being Fred, my cousin, my wife, I, is we finally learned about my grandfather. All during our lives, we knew all about our grandmothers. We knew all about our own families, our mothers, but nobody ever mentioned grandfather. I don't know why, but he was just left out of things. And maybe in their upbringing, that's why that he was always away. But we have now learned that some of the traits that we all seem to have developed or learned, and our parents learned, must have come from him. Fred's father was a leading geologist, sought after by all the oil companies to work over the world. He and his children have become leaders in all their fields. My aunt, or I don't know what we called her, Lima Bell, Charles's daughter, became a leader in the field of teaching, as her father had, and she taught home economics and cooking at Penn State. Received many numerous rewards for her field and her leadership in cooking. And my mother was just a leader of people and devoted her life to the Scouts. So what this means to us is a chance to really learn what our grandparents were, what they did, what they accomplished in their lives, and maybe why we are like we are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mead. Very, very moving, very, very touching. The second inductee into the Hall of Fame Leaders and Legends of the Blindness Field is Dr. Everett Butch Hill. Butch contributed significantly to the field of blindness and visual impairment, and to O&M specifically in numerous ways. To say that one was more relevant or important than any other would be doing him a disservice. That said, I believe Butch's legacy can be clustered into two themes. He first and foremost will be remembered as a prolific scholar and writer. He studied and wrote with purpose in three primary areas: concept development, spatial orientation, and serving the O&M needs of young children who are blind or visually impaired. I told you I wasn't going to do this. But he will also be remembered because of his commitment to his profession and to the preparation of practitioners and future leaders in the field of O&M. In the area of concept development, Butch was the first practitioner in the field to address the importance of assessing and teaching positional and spatial concepts to facilitate the acquisition of sound orientation and efficient mobility skills in children. When Butch entered the field in 1966 at the age of 23, very little about the field of O&M had been documented. As with Charles Campbell's vision to create a journal for professionals to provide a forum for the exchange of ideas in service to the blind, Butch too had the vision to know that in order for the field of O&M to grow, and subsequently for O&M services to improve, a body of literature based in research and practice needed to be established. He embraced this challenge and began, even as an O&M master's degree student in 1968, to plant the seeds of that growth. During that year, Butch's master's degree research paper addressed the need for O&M specialists who work with children to base their teaching on the assessed positional and spatial concept needs of those children, and to understand the importance of acquiring a solid conceptual foundation in these areas in order to become an effective traveler. Up to this point, most O&M instruction was modeled after programs that were delivered for adults who were blind. Butch acknowledged that while this approach appeared to be useful for adult learners, children who were blind, with the right assessment and intervention strategies, might benefit equally from O&M instruction. He deeply believed that orientation and mobility were not terms that simply defined a standard of practice of intervention. He viewed them as symbiotically equal and fundamentally connected to the conceptual development of the child. To Butch, conceptual acquisition enriched the orientation process, which facilitated effective mobility. The work from that original master's degree paper, as well as similar work conducted in fulfillment of his dissertation in the late 70s, led to the only normed referenced assessment instrument of positional and spatial concepts in children with visual impairments in the field. To date, thousands of children nationally and internationally have been assessed using the Hill Performance Test of selected positional concepts. Much of the scholarly passion and drive that Butch exhibited throughout the last 14 years of his life was nested in the work that he conducted while at Peabody College of Vanderbilt University. While there, he studied and worked in two primary areas. The first was in the area of spatial orientation and wayfinding, and the second was in preschool orientation and mobility. Soon after he arrived on the Peabody campus, Butch found his collegial soulmate in psychology professor John Reiser. One was as excited as the other to have discovered their shared interest in spatial orientation. Butch was a jock at heart, and he loved the energy that he shared with John related to this work. I remember Butch telling me about how much fun it was to be able to talk ad infinitum with a colleague who understood, yet challenged him every step of the way. He believed in the end that it made him a better thinker and researcher. That was just Butch. He loved challenges and he embraced new concepts and ideas. The focus of this distinguished collegial endeavor began with a series of investigations designed to understand the spatial ability of individuals who were blind or visually impaired. This work was novel. His collaboration with Reiser and Dan Ashmead and others at Peabody had proved to be an especially rigorous, exhilarating, and fruitful period for him. During this period alone, Butch authored or co-authored 10 peer-reviewed articles on the topic, with one manuscript in preparation at the time of his death. The impact of this work is reflected in the wealth of knowledge the field has gained relative to the spatial abilities of individuals who are blind or visually impaired. The result of their collaborative work continues to hold true today. In fact, you can't write a literature review on the topic without referencing one or more of their publications in your review. In the area of preschool orientation and mobility, Butch was the first in the country to work on the development of an assessment instrument and an instructional strategies curriculum for young preschool children who are blind and visually impaired. He wrote for and was granted a large federal model demonstration grant entitled the Preschool Orientation and Mobility Project, or POMP as it became known, to engage in this work. The focus of the project matched his earlier interests in concept development, but it also gave Butch a sort of go card to sort of think outside the traditional mobility box and to encourage O&M specialists to use adapted mobility devices, such as a hula hoop, to facilitate the movement and mobility in children ages 3 to 5. Butch and his POMP team, folks like Bonnie Dotzenberg and Annette Skellinger and others, many of who are in the audience tonight, set about transforming the manner in which O&M would be addressed and delivered to young kids. As he did with every other passion in his life, he ate, slept, and drank preschool orientation and mobility for years. I am pleased to say that the work he guided in this area remains as the standard of practice when serving this population. Prior to joining the faculty at Peabody, Butch had already left his mark in our field's literature base by contributing one of the best known and most widely used and referenced publications in the field to this day. Beginning at Florida State and culminating later at Western Michigan University, Butch had documented the standard of practice for the profession. The co-authored publication entitled Orientation and Mobility Techniques, A Guide for the Practitioner, systematically presented the skills and techniques that an O&M specialist would follow when teaching orientation and mobility. This publication, more commonly referred to today as the Blue Book, continues to be used by all university personnel preparation programs in the United States in orientation mobility and internationally, and is one of the highest marketed publications of the AFB Press. At his passing in 1994, Butch had 29 peer-reviewed journal publications, and 18 of which he was either the lead author or the co-author of. He also had 3 manuscripts under review and 4 others in progress. In addition, he authored 3 books, 7 book chapters, 3 monographs, and countless conference papers and presentations internationally, nationally, and regionally. He was also highly successful at grant writing, having received 11 personnel preparation grants, 6 federally funded research grants, and 3 federally funded model demonstration and innovation grants. In addition, he had 2 tests published. Butch's second legacy, the second legacy that I'd like to speak about, that Butch has given us, will be his passion for teaching and his love for mentoring students and colleagues. Butch was a natural in the classroom or presenting at a conference. Anyone who has ever had him for class knows that despite his incredible prowess on the basketball court, the classroom was the court where he really shined. I'm okay. Like a good, no, I'm not. Sorry. Oh, and his picture's there. Like a good coach, Butch loved orchestrating learning and watching his team of students learn. I've never had a better teacher. Hold my hand. He was who I aspired, thank you. He was who I aspired to, I can't do this. I'm sorry. Calm down. He was who I aspired to be most like in my own practice. As recognition to his competence in this area, he received the Outstanding Teacher Award from Peabody College of Vanderbilt University, Department of Special Education in 1986, which was the first time the award had ever been presented. As a doctoral mentor, he was tough.
Look at the screen.
Oh. Perfect timing. Well, it was perfect timing. As a doctoral mentor, he was tough. I was probably getting reamed for something there. I don't know. Probably was trying to tell him I needed to cry, and he didn't want to hear it. Oh. But dedicated, he was tough, but dedicated to making sure you had passion and purpose for your research and that you enjoyed life while learning. And finally, Butch loved his profession. That's a great picture of him and Bruce. He was proud that he was part of the development of this new and upcoming field. He enjoyed and looked forward to opportunities to chat with colleagues who were not always so convinced that orientation and mobility really does hold importance in the lives of individuals who are blind and visually impaired. In fact, talking orientation and mobility was therapeutic to Butch. He would alter his schedule or go out of his way simply to have the opportunity to talk O&M. Let me give you a side story on this. This is a typical Butch love. We had a cadre of O&M people who were really working very hard in the community of Nashville, and Butch's idea, this is how much he loved. He couldn't get enough talking O&M with his colleagues doing research and with his teaching on campus, so he created these breakfast meeting forums where we would all come together, some of you may remember this, where we would all come together for a breakfast meeting that he felt was important to hold at 7 o'clock in the morning at a Cracker Barrel in some place pretty far away from the Peabody campus. And of course you never wanted to let Butch down, so you'd have to get up early, haul your butt over to the Cracker Barrel, and you know, act like you were interested. You know? And he would go on and on about O&M, and we would just talk O&M. We would talk about conferencing, and we would talk about what's happening nationally and, you know, what folks are interested in. And of course, this was all about professional development. And at one point during one of these breakfasts, I vividly remember this. He leaned over to me, and he was so excited about this that he said, "Gee, this is going great, isn't it? It's so good." We had maybe 4 or 5 people there who were half asleep, and he said, "Gee, this is going so good, isn't it?" And oh man, if we can get more people in, maybe we should get some speakers to come in. And I'm like looking around and I'm going, Butch, we're at the frickin' Cracker Barrel. You know? He thought this was a conference or something. I don't know what he was thinking. But I said, she's ready to take our order. Can we just order? Butch served his profession well by serving in countless leadership positions within AAWB, the Alliance, and of course AER. He received numerous awards and honors throughout his career and was ultimately honored by the O&M division with the naming of an award after him and another Division IX chair, Jim Newcomer, who is with us this evening. The Newcomer Hill Award is presented to an individual every 2 years who emulate the professional dedication exhibited by both of these leaders. Butch was one of those individuals who not only had all the right stuff, he was generous in sharing it with others. Leadership, inquisitiveness, and mentoring came natural to him. He was the perfect example, like Charles Campbell and so many others in our field, of a dedicated, caring, and compassionate professional. He was the best academic advisor anyone could ever have. He held your hand, helped you grow, and then nudged you along to grow professionally on your own in only the way that Butch Hill could. He was infectious in his love of O&M and in the field of blindness in general. He spread that infection to countless numbers of O&M practitioners and to the students he worked with. He treated you like you were his best friend by spending time with you and sharing with you as a person, not just a student. He and Mary Maureen's heart and home were always open. He challenged his doc students to do work that mattered and to only do the work that they loved. Despite his national and international notoriety, he was humble and genuine. I've never met a person who didn't like or respect Butch. He was a down-to-earth type of guy who never let his ego overpower him. At his memorial, I was disappointed, yet flattered to learn that I was simply one among hundreds who all came to believe that each of us was his best friend. He was just that type of person. Wherever he got the time to do it all, and to do it all so well is beyond me. When I submitted the nomination for Butch into the Hall of Fame, I was asked what impact he had upon my life. So I'll ask that question to you. What impact has Butch had upon my life and you? As I said, it truly is immeasurable. To this day, I continue to strive to live up to his ideals with my work and with my contact with my students and colleagues. I acknowledge at this point in my career that I'll never measure up to his contributions, but because of his influence, I will not give up trying, because that's what Butch would expect. Thank you very much.
So again, it is my very great honor to present a bas-relief plaque to Mary Maureen. Atkins. Atkins.
There's only one.
Sorry, Mary Maureen Snookhill Atkins, honoring this incredibly great man. There you go.
I started crying about a week ago when I got a letter from, an email from Bill Jacobson expressing his regret over missing this really important event in our lives. And as soon as I saw Cay, we both started crying. When I saw John, I started crying. Every time I saw someone, I started crying because I was just so excited to see everyone. And it's such an honor to be here to accept the plaque in Butch's name. I would like to thank some people. Number one, George, for initiating this induction. When he first contacted me, of course I was excited, and my first thought was, well, it's about time. And thank you to the other people who wrote letters of support, and thank you to the advisory committee for selecting Butch for this honor. And thank you to those of you who are here tonight to share in this honor. I know Butch, I know his spirit is delighted that you are here. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for his grandchildren, who he never met, Maggie and Charlotte, to learn a little bit more about their grandfather. So I'm so glad you're here. I'd like to also thank my husband, Jay Atkin, for the slide presentation that you will all have the opportunity to see if you go to the reception afterwards. And I would strongly encourage you to go because you might see yourselves. And thank you to Bill Penrod, Billy Bob, for hosting us. We're staying at his house. As nice as the Marriott is, we preferred to stay with Bill. And we had a great time last night. This is what Butch did. Bill opened his home to us. He shared his family, his friends, his colleagues, one of his students with us last night. And like Butch, he made us stay up last night till 2 o'clock in the morning talking O&M. It was such deja vu. The very first time I ever went to an O&M conference with Butch, I wasn't in the field yet. And I'm not in the field because of him, I'm in the field despite him. Not to spite him, but in spite of him. And I thought everybody was a nutcase. I didn't know anybody, and he didn't introduce me to anybody because we weren't married yet. And all his female students who thought, aha, here's this available man, didn't know who I was, and they stayed up all night talking O&M. And I thought, you people are really boring. Get a life. Well, I do the same thing now, and now I understand, so I'm one of the club. Bob Brasher asked us if we could send some pictures. And at first, actually the picture on the plaque, that's one of the last pictures taken of Butch. And that was taken on his sabbatical out in California. It actually was taken with Shirley, his old girlfriend. And the shirt that he's wearing, it's a really nice silk shirt, plum colored, if you noticed. Nice shirt, eh? Those of you who knew Butch well knew he did not have any fashion sense whatsoever. His favorite attire was jeans and a t-shirt. Well, going out to California, actually it was in Oregon, but he was down in California when that picture was taken. I said, you have to wear at least one nice shirt. So that was the one nice shirt that he had with him. So I was delighted that that picture was selected. Well, then when Bob asked for pictures, I said, gee, Bob, we're working on the house, all of that's in storage, but we found the boxes and boxes and boxes of pictures, and we started going through the hundreds of albums. And in the pictures, you saw a lot of pictures of Butch, some with his dad, some with David, one of his sons. And I assured Mark that there are pictures of him in our slide presentation. Those pictures brought back a lot of memories, a lot of laughter, and a lot of tears. So actually, I guess I started crying a long time ago. When I first met Carl, at AFB, I would go to New York with my students every year to visit the different organizations in New York, and every time I went, I had to ask Carl a question. Maybe what was the flip side of this particular song, whatever. So Carl's going to help us with a little piece here.
Wow. I don't believe this woman did this to me, but as I hugged her, she said she's going to put me on the spot. So I said, okay, what in the world is she going to make me do? And then somebody said Buddy Holly. So I said, if she really puts me on the spot, maybe I can come up with a little ditty relating to Buddy Holly. And in those minutes when I was really quiet in that table and people thought I was in a dream state, I came up with this. Okay, so here we go. What we want you to do, very lightly tap on your tables. I'll give you the beat. And when it comes to the lyrics, we want you to say, well, we love you, Butch. Yes, we love you, Everett Hill. Okay? So we're going to go. If you chilled with Everett Hill, then you know why we are thrilled to honor Everett. Well, Everett Hill, well, we love you, Butch. Yes, we love you, Everett Hill. We're going to do just that last part again. Well, we love you, Butch. Yes, we love you, Everett Hill. One more time. One more time. Yes, we love you, Butch. Yes, we love you, Everett Hill.
Thank you, Mary Maureen. I'll just a few minutes. And again, thank you to the American Printing House for the Blind for all the work that you do every day on behalf of those who are blind and visually impaired. And thank you personally tonight for the amount of time you spent on these two worthy inductees. It's really important to the field, of course. It's important to the family. I want you to know that, and we really do appreciate you staying with us tonight. I want to thank George Zimmerman for initiating the process to induct my father, Everett Butch Hill, into this Hall of Fame. Bob Brasher for his hospitality and allowing me and my family to come up here to Louisville today. And I also want to thank Charles Campbell Mead for his comments on behalf of his family. I drove up here from Nashville today with my family this afternoon for two reasons, really. One, to thank you and to express our appreciation on behalf of his kids. And also, like Charles, I wanted my kids to learn more about their grandfather, because truthfully, Charles, we don't probably talk enough about my father, and maybe it's because it's difficult. When you lose your father at 50 and you're 40 and you just see all he accomplished, it's just overwhelming sometimes, and it's great that they were here to hear some of that. I wanted to also tell you a little bit about, really quickly, both his sons are in the education field, so he clearly had an impact on us. David, in fact, who's here tonight, is in the special ed field, and I know is inspired, and I know that my dad is smiling down and proud of him for that. When you're a kid, everything is so much bigger. That house that you lived in, it was 4 stories tall. When you go back and look at it as an adult, it was really only 2 in a basement. And that the athletes then were larger than life, and now as an adult, you see all the flaws and all the problems. And so when I would meet adults as a kid, and they would in the field of orientation and mobility, then they would say, "Oh, you're Butch Hill's son. Wow, he's so famous. He's so brilliant. He's done this and he's done that." And I'd look over at my dad in the T-shirt and jeans, and I'd say, "Yeah, okay." But then, as a teenager, a high school student, I had the inspiration, I guess, to go up to Vermont as a camp counselor, because then the New York City School for the Blind ran a summer camp in Hardwick, Vermont, and I spent 2 summers up there as a camp counselor working with visually impaired and blind kids. And I'd go up there and I'd meet other counselors who were, I guess, in the field or students, and they would find out that I was the son of Everett Butch Hill, and they would just sort of sit with a glazed look of awe and inspiration, and I would wonder, I would think back to home. Yeah, that's my dad in the blue jeans and the T-shirts who's listening to rock and roll records and watching The Simpsons, and this is the guy that's inspiring people across the country. And so I kind of wondered to what extent this myth of Butch Hill was really true as I got older, because as a kid you look up to your dad anyway, and you sort of naturally believe that. He got an award from President Carter in the 1970s, and that was pretty impressive. That went a long way for me actually believing that. And then I guess what I wanted to tell you today is, now I'm almost 40, and I understand that he really did make a tremendous difference in the lives of really thousands of people across the country in this field. And if I ever had any doubt at all as to whether his work was important, whether he made a difference, you'll seal that tonight with his induction to the Hall of Fame. So again, thank you on behalf of his sons, on behalf of his grandchildren. We really do appreciate this honor, and I know that he's all with us tonight. Thank you.